Safari, airplane mode, switch page 1 of 6.
What's going on, everyone?
Agree, radio button.
This is Political Ideas and Thoughts, and the reason why I'm making this episode today is because I've seen, some YouTube channels do this, where they make an episode where they answer a, political compass test. They answer the questions of the test, and they give you their own other opinions along with the test, based on the answers that they have here. And I'm going to do this with this one, and then I'm going to do it with the 8 values test. Maybe with this recording, maybe with another one, depending on how much time we're spending here.
Screen recording in progress. Button. Screen recording in progress. No SIM. TP link under VPN on. Stat 0224. Status bar item. If economic globalization is inevitable.
Okay, so let's begin.
If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Form start.
If economic globalization is inevitable, and it should serve humanity rather than global interests. I mostly agree, but the problem, and it's not like I want corporations to fully, be greedy or anything like that. It's not why I'm not completely agreeing, but I mostly agree because
Strongly. I'd always support my agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Checked.
I agree because I do think it's a good idea for corporations to serve human interest and not the bottom line. But at the same time, I understand that corporations, they're not just non-profits. They do have to make a profit in some way. So there has to be a bit of a, not necessarily a compromise, but a a sort of stance between those two that's suitable for everybody, not just the corporations. And sometimes that means that they have to do things that may not necessarily be in their greatest interest to do so, but it's in the greatest interest of not just humans to do so, but the earth. There's a lot of pollution and climate change stuff going on, and so there has to be more going on besides the fact that you're just going for the bottom line. You have to put the earth involved in this as well, because this is the only earth we have. This is one of the reasons why I'm against colonization as well, because we're not doing very well at protecting the earth as it is, and we're supposed to, and then people want us to colonize other places. We can't even protect the earth that we have properly. We have corporations with greed and all these other things, and we're supposed to colonize another planet. Why? Because we screwed this one up so badly. I'm sorry, but that's not acceptable. We have to work on a solution. I'm not saying that we can't colonize other planets, but we have to be smart about this and not just colonize other planets. They can't just be the only solution. As far as that goes, that's another subject. That's a can of worms right there. But
strongly agree. Radio button. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Form start. I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Form start.
I'd always support my country, whether it's right or wrong. I would disagree with that.
I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong. Form strong disagree. Radio button. Checked.
And the reason mostly being that the country is usually wrong. And I'm not saying that they're always wrong, but I'm saying that when they're wrong, they have to be shown that they're wrong. And this is one of the things that I do like about the idea of having a sort of popular law system, where actually this was one of the ideas that I agreed with when there's a YouTube channel called I forget what it was called. I think it's Secular Talk, but he had this idea that he talked about on the Joe Rogan podcast, where he said that there was when you're voting in presidents to be in the United States president, you should also have this mandatory process where you're voting in the top 5 most favorited laws, the most popular laws that people want. And I think that's a really smart and really good idea. And if that doesn't, and if that doesn't really suit you, what could also be done is that it should be mandated that the president-elect, if he becomes president, should at least consider putting in these 5 laws, or that he should put in these 5 laws in some way, or think about it in some way. And the reasons are pretty obvious, but
Agree. Strongly. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Form start.
no one chooses her country at birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I agree with that, but I also understand why people are proud of their countries. And, to some extent, I am proud that we are, to some extent, I won't go so far as most people, but we are, pretty good at doing certain things, but a lot of people say that we're number 1. U.S., we're number 1. I wouldn't go there, because, well, number 1, I don't really like ranking systems like that, especially when what I find with pride is this sort of blindness that happens. But that's another subject. I might have to make a video on that, but
Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree. No one chooses his or her country of birth, so it's foolish to be agree. Radio button. Unchecked. 3 of 4.
so partly agree.
Checked. Strongly agree. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. Form start.
Our race has many superior qualities compared to other races. Strongly disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. Checked. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Form start.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Disagree.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Checked.
And the only reason why I'm not choosing strongly disagree is because that can be true, but it can also be extremely untrue. And so there's nuances with this, and there's caveats and whatnot. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Like the enemy of Iran, like say, which I don't think this is actually true, but say that the enemy, okay, that might actually be true, but say the enemy of Iran is Saudi Arabia. Okay, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, Saudi Arabia is not exactly our friend. I don't know if you know this, but Saudi Arabia has been funding terrorism in the Middle East. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but we're funding them, we're giving them weapons. We shouldn't be doing this. Especially when we're trying to be fighting terrorism. Although, to be honest, we've never really done that either. We've funded terrorism. We've, when the Mujahideen was owned, well, not necessarily owned, but the leader of the Mujahideen, who basically, for those who don't know, America had this idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so the Mujahideen was the enemy of the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union was invading Afghanistan at the time, the 70s and 80s, and so the American leadership decided to work with the Mujahideen because of this stupid idea. And the Mujahideen was controlled, well, I don't know if it was necessarily controlled, but it was led by Osama bin Laden, and it became what is known as the Al Qaeda. I think maybe the Taliban too. I'm not sure, but so this idea is stupid.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. The enemy of my enemy. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Checked. 2 of 4.
But at the same time, it can be true. It's possible that it is true.
Strongly disagree. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Form start.
Military action that sometimes defies international law is sometimes justified. When I've always had this question posed to me by this questionnaire, I've always had this problem that I don't know all that much about international law, and today is no different. So it's possible that it could be justified, but what I know about most of international law, I think international law would be like the Geneva Convention or something like that. I'd say that probably
Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Form start.
it's probably not a good idea to do that because it's just not. But I can see where it may have to be in some cases. But with serious reservations and concerns on that one if they do end up defying international law. So there's that.
Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked.
So-
3 of 4. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Form start. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of. Checked.
So I'm gonna put disagree and not strongly disagree for that reason.
Strongly disagree. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. Form start.
There's now a worrying fusion between information and entertainment. Not really. I mean, a lot of people are worried about this, but the problem is it's always been kind of like this in some other forms, anyways. I'm not saying that it's not a problem sometimes, or that it couldn't be. But I'm not as worried about it as other people because people are as varied and different as the idea of snowflakes. People are as unique as snowflakes, and so that if some people's arguments are that because of this boring fusion, it might mess with people's heads or something. But people are different, so it may mess with some people's heads, but it may not. So I take a nuanced approach to this. Although, to be honest, I take a nuanced approach to pretty much everything. So
Strongly agree. Radio button. There is now a worrying fusion of information and disagree. Radio button.
So disagree.
Check. Agree. Strongly agree. Radio
But
button.
not
Unchecked. 4 of
strongly
4.
because I can see the argument.
Next page. Button. End. Article. Reader available. Next page. End. Article. End. Main. Safari. Open navigate. Test. Take the test. Strongly disagree. Radio button. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start.
People are ultimately divided by class rather than nationality. I would say that it's probably almost equal. Let me turn this off. This may be hindering with your hearing of what I'm saying, but let me turn it down that way. I'd say that it's probably...
Now, people are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start. Now, the economy. We're talking at page 2 of 6. Now, the economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start.
I would say it's probably equal, but I would also argue that it's probably closer to class because, well, a lot of people, I'm going to do this on him. A lot of people would say that we are divided more by class than nationality, or that we're divided by nationality rather than class. But I honestly think it's equal. And I think that they all have a part to play in, who's dividing, who's against what. So I don't really have an answer to this question.
Disagree. Radio. Agree. Radio. Strongly agree. Strongly agree. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Agree. Strongly disagree. People are ultimately divided more by class than by...
But I'd probably disagree only because I've seen evidence that more people seem to be divided by nationality. I've been seeing this a lot more, especially over the past 5-10 years. There's more white supremacists. There's more, people who are saying that, that racism is worse than it's ever been. There's black people who are saying that white people are racist. There's white people saying there's black people racist. All kinds of people racist. But I don't know how much of that is true. I don't believe most of that is as true as they think it is. I don't think it has to do necessarily with race. I'm not saying that it has nothing to do with race, but I think most of it has to do with misunderstandings and ideology, misunderstandings of ideology and perspective.
Strongly disagree. People are ultimately divided more by class. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start.
But I'm going to say nationality only because that seems to be the big thing. Although class is also the big thing, but which is why I say it's equal, and why this one's hard to really decide. But I say nationality because it does seem to be a big issue in a lot of people's minds.
Disagree. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Form start.
Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I've always had this question too, and I always said it was equal. I always said that it should be equally as important. But I've always said as well with this one that unemployment is probably a little bit more important. So
strongly controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. Form start.
Probably disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio.
Yeah.
Checked. Strongly disagree because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment. They require regulation. Form start.
Because corporations cannot be trusted. They have to be regulated or a protective environment. At the current moment, this is probably most likely true. But at the same time, well, you see, the problem I have here is that I don't necessarily think regulations do anything. I'm not saying that regulations do nothing at all. That they're, just a waste of, time and space and money. But I don't think they do that much. Let me try and do something right quick. Because this is getting a little much here with my headphones.
Vertical scroll bar, 9 pages, 13%, adjustable. Swipe up or down with one finger to adjust the value.
And so, what was I
2
saying?
0 next page, button, end, article, end. Screen recording in progress. Screen recording in progress. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. 3. Disagree. Radio. Strongly. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the. Agree. Strongly disagree. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Agree. Strongly goes with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Form start. Agree. 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 Reformat options. Button. Reopen. Disagree. Radio button. Strongly agree. Controlling inflation is more important than disagree. Strongly disagree. Strongly agree. Radio button. Strongly disagree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment. They require regulation. Form start.
Like I said, I do think that's probably true in the moment. But I also add that corporations do seem to be, some of them do seem to be aware of this problem, or, trying to do some things. But I have a problem with the idea of regulating everything as it is. I don't think it works as much as a lot of liberals and progressives seem to think it does. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying that you're dumb for thinking that it works. I'm saying that it's more complicated than this. And I think that the way to really deal with this problem is to really show people and convince them how this is true, or how what they are doing is causing this problem, but not doing it in a judgmental way, or even in a you have to do this type of way, but in here's what I've seen, here's why it might be a good idea to do this, even if you don't agree with even if you don't care about the environment. Here's the other reasons why I think it might be a good idea for you to do this. And the other reasons mostly have to do with the fact that there's many reasons, and I could go into much depth when it comes to that particular subject.
Strongly agree. Radio. Disagree. Strongly agree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment.
But I say for now, because I say yes for now, because I do think that they're too rigidly orange, stage orange. A lot of them. There's corporations that are stage green, but I think they are also, a lot of them are also stage orange. Even the tech monopolies, even though they do have a lot of stage green and some stage yellow, I also think that they also have a lot of orange. Maybe even mostly orange in some ways.
Because corporations cannot be trusted to disagree. Because corporations disagree. Radio button.
So I say agree, but with some caveats and nuances as always.
From each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Form start.
Alright.
Tabs button.
So
Disagree. Radio button. Strong. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily disagree. Strongly agree. From each according to his ability.
So I think this is always a good idea in theory, but the problem, and I know a lot of Republicans and conservatives have a problem with this idea that from each according to his ability to each according to his need is, but it is a good idea in theory, but the problem happens in practice. And the problem isn't necessarily with the idea. The problem is with the dogmatism of, socialism. And believe it or not, some people think that, socialism, like if they were to know about spiral dynamics, they'd say socialism or communism is stage green. And socialism sometimes can be green, but when it comes to communism, particularly in the Soviet Union and other communist countries, I would actually say, and Actualize.org has said this, but I'd actually agree with them that they are actually stage blue. And as far as China goes, because a lot of people like to point out China and say they're all far left, but actually, China is extremely capitalistic. I think China's way more capitalistic than the United States. So I'd say that they're blue and orange. Because they still have a lot of ideological positions. Because stage blue is... it's hard to really go into, but China is definitely a stage blue. Our country's government is also definitely kind of a stage blue, stage green as well, but also and mostly stage blue and orange though, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that green is the greatest thing, because green has problems, as I've pointed out sometimes in my podcast, in my episode, and my YouTube channel. And
strongly agree. From each according to his ability to each.
It's complicated. So as far as this theory, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, is a good idea. Let me see how it's phrased, because
from each according to his ability to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. Form start.
So it's a good idea, with some caveats and with some nuances, because of the ways in which this idea has been practiced, because of the problems of implementing this system. It often leads to it not being a good idea. Not because the idea is bad, but because of the ways in which it is practiced. As far as this idea is how it should be implemented, in my personal opinion, as far as a lot of things actually are concerned, in my personal opinion, the way these things should be implemented should have very little to nothing to do with government as we understand it now. It should be more communal, and government too, but that's a complicated subject to kind of go into. But
vertical back button. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Because strongly agree. Strongly agree. Form. Because agree. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily disagree. Strongly disagree. Radio. Strongly agree. From each according to his ability. Disagree. Radio button. Disagree.
So, as far as this answer goes, I agree, but I also am very, very, very hesitant and very, very much warning and sort of pointing out this problem. So I'm kind of a minimalist on this one. But I'm going to agree because it is a good idea. But just when it comes into practice, it doesn't often come into practice in the ways in which it is actually beneficial for mankind.
Strongly disagree. Radio. Disagree. Radio. Agree. Radio button. From each according to his ability. Agree. Strongly agree. Agree. Checked. Strong. The freer the market, the freer the people. Form start.
The freer the market, the freer the people. I would say kind of. And I know I've said that as far as that goes, that there's caveats, and the same thing is said here. You have to be very careful not to put the markets above the people as well. You have to have a sort of balance, a sort of middle ground between your bottom line and not only humankind, but the earth itself and its ecology and the entire population of creatures and planet. That's kind of complicated to really do in practice, but
Strongly agree. Radio button.
that's my caveat, I suppose.
The freer. Strongly disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. It strongly It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Form start. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. Form.
In some ways I'd say yes, but in some ways, in a lot of ways I'd say no, but only because, it's their right to drink whatever they want. I don't really care what they drink. I don't think it's sad or happy. I think it's ridiculous that water is such a ripoff. And the other problem that I have with it is that, and I don't know if most people know this, but they actually put a lot of chemicals in the water. Now, I'm not just talking about tap water. I'm talking about bottled water. They put all these chemicals in the bottled waters, and that's the problem. That's the thing I kind of have a problem with. I can understand that I don't really know exactly why they do this, but it is one of the problems that I have with it. And I think that's part of the why it can be kind of why they charge it as much as they do as well. I think that's part of it. Part of it has to do with greed as well, but I think part of it has to do with the stupid idea of putting chemicals in it. There's a bunch of chemicals in the bottled waters, like benzene and all these other things. I don't know what they put chemicals in there for, but I'm not sure if it's such a good idea. They do the same thing for public tap water as well. They put fluoride and all these other I think it's mostly fluoride they put in there, and that is not a good thing because fluoride has been known to be toxic. It messes with a lot of like rationally scientific minded people might get angry at me for saying this, but it messes with people. I'm not saying that you're gonna be. I know some people say that when you drink fluoridated water, that you're gonna be like docile or something like that. I don't necessarily know if that's true, but I do know that it messes with this thing in the brain called the pineal gland, and some people think that that's like one of the chakras, but it's actually not located in that area of the chakra. It's like deeper in the brain somewhere, and I'm not sure exactly what it does, but I know that the fluoride itself calcifies that gland, which can't be good for the brain. I'm sure that gland does something.
Strongly agree. Radio. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now
So, I mostly disagree with this statement, but I also agree with it because, it's ridiculous, and it's also disturbing that they put these chemicals in there as well. I understand why they might do it, but it's also, I can also understand how it could be a bad idea to put chemicals in there like this.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Form start.
Land shouldn't be a commodity that's bought and sold. I disagree only to a certain point. And this, I might as well talk about this idea. This isn't actually my idea, but I think it's a really good idea and a solid idea of dealing with problems. Corporations, polluting areas and dumping toxic waste into land and whatnot. That was his idea that was proposed in Conversations of God, Volume 3. And you might not like the idea of God or whatever. It's not really about that. It's about this idea that that you can have land that you buy and sell and all these things. But if it's been shown that you've polluted this land, or that you've harmed this land in some way, then at that point it's no longer your land, because it's been shown that you're not responsible. You're not acting responsibly for the land. So
Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. Form start.
mostly disagree, but I also kind of agree because of that reason.
Disagree. Radio button. Checked. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. Form start.
And it's regrettable that people make fortunes while contributing nothing to their society. It depends on what they're doing with that fortune. I think it's George Soros, but and people don't like George Soros because of his political ideas and whatnot, but I believe that this is kind of what he does. He manipulates money in a lot of ways. But I think he also contributes to a lot of charities and other things. So I kind of agree, but kind of disagree.
It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society.
I think I mostly disagree because the idea that fortunes can, help, even if they're made in sort of a manipulative way. Like say you have somebody. I mean, it depends on how bad it is, obviously. But say you have somebody who is, for some reason, making money by manipulating markets or whatever it is. And if they're using, like, say if it's like 5% of this money, say they've earned about $200 million by doing this, say they spent about $25 million of this on charities. Well, it's ridiculous that they're, manipulating this money or whatever, which I actually don't really care about that they do this or not. But I know some people do. But say you could think that, but they're still spending money on charity. So I mean, it's like the best of both worlds here. They're making money and they're giving it to people in need and whatnot. So it's a mix. It can be a mixed bag.
Strongly agree. Radio button.
I mean, of course, you can just have greedy people as well, but
Agree. Radio button. Disagree. Radio. Strongly agree. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4. Checked.
so mostly disagree.
Disagree. Agree. Radio. Strongly agree. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit with shareholders. Form start.
I already talked about this. Disagree.
Disagree. Agree. Radio. Disagree. Radio.
With some
Check.
caveats and nuances, obviously. Like I said, I think it should be a balance. I mean, I think it should be a little bit more about helping people and, not polluting the planet and not messing too much with, the inhabitants of the planet. Not just talking about humans, but other animals and whatnot. But also, making a profit as well. Otherwise, you really can't run an effective company. You won't be able to do as much.
Agree. Radio. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. 2 of 4. Agree. The rich are too highly taxed. Form start.
The rich are too highly taxed. Oof, this is a complicated and nuanced question. Because the answer is yes and no. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, if the person is rich, who is rich is honest, and you know, does his taxes here, has banks here, then the answer is possibly a yes. But it's also a no because you have corporations who can get around these loopholes, or even worse, go to these places like the Caymans and they can, get cents on the dollar as far as taxes go. So the answer is yes and no.
The rich are too highly taxed. Form start. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4.
But I would say I'd probably disagree not because I think that the rich should be more taxed, but because these loopholes should be closed and these practices of offshore banking should somehow be dealt with. Somehow.
Disagree. Radio button. The rich are too highly taxed. Form start. Strongly disagree. Agree. Disagree.
So
disagree. Checked.
Only partly, though.
Strongly disagree. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Form start.
I've had this question before as well, and my answer is only if it doesn't in some way interfere with those other people getting medical care. That's my nuance on this one.
Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Forms. Strong. Disagree. Agree. Radio button.
So
Unchecked. 3 of 4.
Agree.
Checked. Strong. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Form start.
That depends. If they didn't know what they were saying. See, the problem with the question like this is, so say you have a business where you're like a financial advisor, and you're not actually, so say you're making predictions about which stock to buy. If you don't know that a stock could go bad, and somebody says that this is misleading later on when the stock goes bust, I would say no. But if the government finds that they deliberately misled, they knew that this stock was bad, and they misled the public anyway, then the answer is yes. And the only reason why I make this distinction is because I know that this kind of term can be used to mislead people, ironically.
Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Forms.
So
Strongly disagree.
agree.
Agree. Radio button. Check. Strongly disagree. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Form start.
Hold up.
A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Form start.
I would probably say yes, except for the fact that already happens anyways. We already have monopolies. And nobody questions it, really. I mean, Amazon's a monopoly. Somebody might say that that's because people are buying mostly from Amazon, but it didn't necessarily start that way, and they had, and I don't really want to go too deep into this, but apparently they were inefficient at what they were doing, and there were some companies and whatnot who could have easily done it a lot better and much easier, but somehow they figured out a way to make sure that they were the only ones who could really do it, because they had certain ways of dealing with things. And some libertarians could call, there's all these other types of monopolies, like natural monopolies, which are basically monopolies that are created because of the way that capitalism can sometimes work. So basically, the way to think of it is, say somebody has somehow developed a superior service to all of its competitors. So say you have a company, and this could also work in a sort of predatory way as well. So the answer is kind of a yes, but it's also because monopolies come in all kinds of forms. So monopolies themselves. I don't really want to go into too much detail here, but I don't necessarily think that monopolies in a certain field, whether that be technology or shipping or whatever it is, they don't foster innovation. And so I don't necessarily believe in monopolies. And there are actually government monopolies that have actually existed for some time, and because of those government monopolies, there hasn't been innovation in those fields in a long time. And some conservatives say that government cannot create innovation. Private enterprise is better, but that's not always true either. So,
Strongly agree. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Form start.
I would say yes, but I'd also add what I've added, that monopolies themselves are usually not good for the economy anyways, because they don't usually foster innovation or good competition, especially when the monopolies are held up by laws and things like this.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Agree. Strongly agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Agree. Agree. Checked.
And you may not think that this happens, that laws protect monopolies, but they do. An easier example to talk about is that a lot of states, I think most states do this, where they require you to only deal with a company in that state, in that area, whether that be insurance or whatever. And part of that I can kind of understand, but also part of it I can't. So.
Strongly agree. Radio. Next page. Button. Strong. Agree. Radio button. Checked. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of next page. Button. End. Next page. End. Article. End. Main. Open navigation. Safari. Open. Test. Link. Navigation.
And that's
Landmark.
very complicated. I'm trying to make it shorter, but I've probably gone over an hour at this point, so.
Strongly disagree. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start. Now. The economy. Page 2 of 6. Test. Heading level 1. Article. Landmark. Page 2 of 6. Now. The economy. We're talking attitudes here, not the FTSE index. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 1 of 4. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. 3 of 4.
What the hell? I guess it didn't work.
People. Now. The economy. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. Form start.
I guess I have to answer this one. I guess I'll say
Strongly
nationality.
disagree. Radio button. Checked. Controlling inflation is more. Strongly disagree. Strong disagree. Strong disagree. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Tabs. Button. Show. Share. Forward. Back. Button. Next page. Button. End. Next page. End. Article. Tabs. Button.
Fixed it.
Open navigation. Strongly disagree. Strong. People are ultimately divided more by class than by.
What the hell?
Disagree. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 1 of disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Radio button. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Agree. Radio button. Checked. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Agree. Radio button. Checked. Strongly agree. Disagree. Strongly agree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Disagree. Strongly agree. Agree. Radio button. Checked. 3. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Radio button. Strongly agree. Radio button. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Strongly agree. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Disagree. Radio button. Check. Agree. Radio button. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Strongly agree. Radio button. Agree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Form start.
Oh, I missed this one. Possibly because of monopolies. So protectionism is where you're trying to. I would say, basically, so protectionism is where I think from what I understand is you're trying to stop other companies from, getting in on trade. Not stop it completely, but stopping it, to a certain extent, and you're protecting, your national companies. And I would say.
Strongly agree. Radio button. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade.
Possibly, but also with some serious caveats here, because I don't really know whether that could also be kind of problematic itself. I imagine it can. So that's what I would say. I'd probably say possibly though. So yes.
Disagree. Radio button. Disagree. Radio. Checked. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver the profits with shareholders. Strong disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Strong. The rich are too highly taxed. Form. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Strong. Those with the ability to pay should have access. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Agree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Agree. Radio button. Checked. Strong. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Strong. Agree. Strong. A genuine free market requires restrictions on. Strongly disagree. Agree. Strongly. Next page. Button. End. Next page. End. Article. Share.
Hopefully
Button.
that fixed it. 'Cause it was
Open
really
navigation. Check. Disagree. Radio button. Strongly disagree. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be. Now we look at some of your personal social. Page 3 of 6. Now we look at some of your personal social values. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Form start.
totally disagree with that.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4.
Okay, I mostly disagree with that.
Checked.
There's an argument, and I actually kind of agree with this argument, that if you're a man, you really have no say in whether, a woman gets an abortion or not. And I agree with that for the most part. But I also think that when it comes to being in a relationship, I don't think it should be just about one person deciding. I think it should be a communal decision. But I ultimately think it should be the woman's decision to decide. I think they should talk about it though, but that's another subject. But I mostly disagree. And the reason why I'm not completely disagreeing is because of the seriousness of abortion. And this is something that I don't think some people realize is, and I'm not saying that abortion is bad or wrong or anything. I'm just saying that, and this is something to be said about sex as well, and sexual liberation. I'm all for it, but I also understand. I also have this realization that sex is not. It's actually a really powerful responsibility, and it's a very serious thing, and it's not really taken as seriously as it should be in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that sex is wrong. I'm saying that there's a serious responsibility that you're having. Not just because you could have a baby with somebody, but because you're engaging with a truly intimate act with somebody, and that's not something that you should necessarily take lightly. You have to have responsibility about it. This is my own personal opinion, obviously, but I don't know. That's just my personal opinion about that. But
strongly disagree. Radio abortion when the woman's life is disagree. Radio button checked. 2 of 4. All authority should be questioned. Form start. Strong disagree. Radio button
yes.
Checked.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
Strongly agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Form start.
Disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio button checked.
Violence against somebody who's violent, unless it's self-defense, unless it's like your only option, is really the only way to deal with things. I'm talking mostly about governments and, personal actions as well. My reasoning is that, well, it's complicated, but it has to do with the complications of the Middle East. And this might take forever to try and explain, so I'm going to try and shorten and really simplify this. But so many people for the longest time and still have this idea, and it's not just even about terrorism, but that terrorism is evil and that these people are just evil and bad and whatnot. But you see, the problem is that they don't. It's not even that they don't agree. It's that they have reasons, and their reasons compel them to do this. And you can say they're wrong. That's fine. But to go after them. I'm not saying that you shouldn't defend yourself against them. But to deliberately go after them, however that might be, with drone strikes or whatever, is not smart. It is just it's just not working. I mean, why do you think the terrorism has been, not even the terrorism, why do you think the conflicts of the Middle East have been increasing? It's because of this idea. It's because they have been practicing this idea. And I'm not saying that I disagree in some ways. It can be true that it may be the only way. But when the group that's so far away, and when we have perceptions that are really, really advanced in a lot of ways, we don't really need to do this. So,
Strong. Disagree. Radio. Strong. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. 2 of
I
4.
mostly disagree.
Agree. Strong. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Form start.
I actually once agreed with this idea at one point, but somebody actually pointed out that you wouldn't want to have to pay exorbitant amounts of money to visit these places, because it's like a public sort of place, and you're learning things there, and you're looking at historical or cultural things there. So that made me realize that maybe they should be propped up a little bit. Depending, I mean, I guess I can put a nuance here, but depending on how historical or cultural it is. I mean, I'm not talking about a museum that have, penises, in them, and they do exist. I'm not joking. And so there's my caveat.
Strongly agree. Strongly agree. Radio. Strongly disagree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Strong. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. Form start.
That I actually agree with because, well, schools are indoctrination camps, but that's another subject.
Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Checked. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Form start.
I mostly disagree, and I'm not saying that I'm superior or that they're inferior and they need to be in their own, stick to their own kind. But the only reason why I mostly disagree is because of these serious differences that a lot of these cultures have. I'm all for multiculturalism, but I'm also for having a sort of unifying basis of sorts. And whether that unifying basis be freedom or living peacefully or whatever it is, something like this, or living harmoniously or whatever, I don't really care. Something small like this. Freedom, living peacefully, living harmoniously. And sometimes a lot of these cultures and tribal types of people will not necessarily do this. So I agree. I disagree with this.
Strongly agree. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Form start.
I actually disagree with the statement, but I also understand. I see the grain of truth behind the statement, the grain of wisdom behind the statement. So I mostly disagree, but with some caveats of sorts. Not necessarily about stick to your own kind, but if you're going to be disruptive, don't expect me to hold you up and make you a part of this country. I mean, I'll help you and I'll try and show you why it'd be a good idea to be harmonious, and I'll try and work with you. But at a certain point, you can only do so much. That's my reasoning behind it.
Strongly agree. Radio. All people have their rights, but
Only part of this. So
disagree. Agree. Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree. All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2. Checked. Agree. Strongly agree.
I do
Radio button.
mostly
Unchecked.
disagree.
4. Good parents. Strongly disagree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Form start.
definitely disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 1 of 4. Check.
it's been shown that spanking doesn't actually work. So, biggest reason actually isn't even necessarily about discipline. It's not just that it doesn't discipline your children, but if you want to teach your children to be nonviolent, spanking your children doesn't do that. You want to teach your children not to yell and not to, have bad behavior. Spanking your children doesn't do that. So that's my reasoning mostly. I mean, not to mention the idea of the idea of abusing your children. But that's another subject as well.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Forms. Strongly disagree. Check. Agree. Strongly agree. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Forms. Strongly disagree. Radio button.
Yes.
Checked.
There's a lot of nuances I could go into that, but I'll just leave it there because that would take me an hour to go into. But in general, I would say yes. But I'd also add, and that's because of the way that parenting is done, and also it's the way that also have an idea about how to parent kids. But honestly, I'm not a parent, so I don't know what would be right or wrong here anyway. So, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm right on all of this and that my points of view are completely correct, but especially on this one about parenting, but that's another story.
Disagree. Strongly disagree. It's natural for children. Disagree. Radio button. Checked. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Form start.
Strongly agree.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. The prime. Agree. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Possessing marijuana for personal use. Strongly agree. The prime function. Strongly agree. Radio button. Checked.
Actually, it's interesting because I have a completely, I would almost say a completely original idea about how the government should handle most, well, maybe not even most of drugs, but drugs like marijuana that don't necessarily have as much of an addictive property as other drugs, if any. And the idea is to basically, and this has to do with other things as well, but to actually make, so basically the way it seems to work is that you have a law that says yes or no. But when it comes to something that, if doesn't harm another person, the answer should be, this thing is null and void, except for these very specific circumstances where it could possibly hurt somebody else. Say if you have an addiction to heroin and it is hurting your family because you're stealing from people, or you have debt collectors, or some reason like that. So there is a little bit of a nuance in this one, but that's my idea, is to make it null and void for government to interact except for very, very specific reasons why they should, or why somebody should. Not necessarily government, but somebody with help from the government if necessary.
Agree. Disagree. Radio. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Possessing marijuana for personal use should.
And the main reason for this is because of the way that the government has treated addictions and drugs for the longest time. They haven't treated it properly, and it's increased the drug war. And there's other reasons as well, but
agree. The prime function. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Strongly agree. Radio button. Checked. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Form start.
The prime function of schooling should equip the future generation to find jobs. I would say no, but kind of a yes. But mostly a no. Because that's what, well, it's complicated, but I do think the education system should be severely changed because the way that the education system is now is not working. We have the lowest, I think we have one of the lowest levels of education within a developed country. It's probably, I think it's one of the lowest. And it's because of the way our education system works. It's complicated, though.
Strongly agree. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Strong disagree. Radio button.
So I
Check.
mostly disagree, but I also somewhat agree because you need a generation. You need generations to have independent thought, but you also need them to have sort of practical skills that you're going to need within your lifetime that you don't get taught in school, like accounting, like your taxes and how to properly manage a budget. I mean, you get subjects like that, but those are mostly electives from what I've noticed. How to balance a budget, how to, how to influence your credit score, how to, become more creative. If you have that skill, if you have the talent to be whatever it is, how you could have classes like how to increase this talent, how to, how to survive in the day-to-day world. Classes like that, you don't really have those. You have stupid classes that you don't really need to a certain point. And I'm not saying that they're completely useless, but up to a certain point they kind of are. Like math, like algebra, like those classes are useful, but only to a certain point. English, that class is useful, but only to a certain point. Science, that class is only useful to a certain point. And we need other classes that are way, way, way more important.
Strongly disagree. Strongly agree. The prime function of schooling should be people with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Form start.
I disagree, but I also think they should be not told that if they have these problems with their children, should be shown to them what is going to happen to these children, and in graphic ways if necessary. I'm not saying be, a dick about it, but be very honest.
Strongly. People with serious inheritable disabilities should strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Disagree. Radio. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4. Checked.
This is one of the problems I have with these political tests and politics in general, is that usually it's too simplified. And as far as this test is concerned, I don't think anybody has ideas like this. If they do, they're very uncommon, very unusual. But I'm sure they do exist, but I doubt they exist as much as to the extent that it requires you to have these questions on this test. But that's just me.
The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. Form start.
No. The most important thing for children to learn is harmonious, to be learn how to be harmonious, beneficial to other people, learn how to be independent-minded, but not like rebellious, not like violent, and yet not like undisciplined at the same time. So
strongly agree. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. Form start.
Yeah, I would say no, but with the caveat.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4. Checked.
Not to like an extreme degree. Some discipline, but not to an extreme degree.
There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. Form start.
I would say, and this may sound very controversial, but actually I wouldn't say peoples. I would say cultures.
There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. Form start.
Because people are not the culture they grow up in. And the reason why I'm saying culture is because people have this idea that, oh, there's no savage people. Everything's relative. And that's true, a lot of things are relative, and there is no savage people as such. But there are cultures that are more, I wouldn't necessarily call them savage though, but that are more primitive than others, that are more destructive, I guess you could say, than others. And those cultures are that way because of the ways in which they grow up, and the environments in which they live. Most of those cultures have difficult survival strategies that they have to deal with. So it's not necessarily that they're bad or that they're inferior. It's because of the ways in which things are in their area.
There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. Form start.
So I guess I kind of mostly agree.
Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. 3.
But
Check.
with that caveat.
Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Form start.
I know a lot of people have a problem with this, but I honestly don't, as much as most people. Of course, there's caveats here, but I honestly don't, because what they're not missing is that these people that refuse to work, if they do get society's support, what's going to happen? You're going to get taxes from these people because they're going to be buying stuff. They're going to be getting things, shopping, or they're going to be giving some of that money away to, friends or charities or whatever. And although there is an argument, this also has to do with UBI as well.
Vertical scroll bar. 11 pages.
God damn it.
There are no savage and civilized peoples. Those who strongly disagree. Those who are able to work and refuse.
And this is, some of the arguments against UBI as well, but that UBI kind of leads to a lack of innovation of sorts and a lack of motivation because you have this money. But I don't necessarily think that's true, but it can kind of be true for some people. But you can't stop people from being a certain way. You can't control how people are going to be. Admittedly, though, it's complicated, and I don't necessarily advocate for universal basic income or anything like this. But I also do think that it would help as well, because it would also bring taxes, because most of this money is going to be spent in some way by this person, which is going to create taxes and whatnot, especially if you have an value-added tax.
Strongly agree. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. Strongly disagree. Radio button.
So disagree.
Checked.
But with some caveats, of course. Like I'm saying, there has to be a balance here, not just with this, but with budgets and other things to consider as well.
When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio button.
Disagree. But I also add that if you do this, that you can also end up with some too much ruminating and too much negativity. So that you have to have a balance with that as well. So
strongly disagree. Radio button. Checked. Strongly agree. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio.
I
Checked.
disagree.
Disagree. Agree. Strongly agree. Radio button. What's good for the most successful corporations is always, ultimately, good for all of us. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4.
I disagree.
Checked.
Because the corporation is out for the bottom line. And I'm not saying that can't help people. It can. And it does sometimes. But the cost often doesn't, especially when the corporation doesn't care how it gets the profits. It often does it in ways that make people worse off than they were. Especially in poverty-stricken countries, these corporations come in where people have no money, and then they give them work, and they say, oh, well, now they have jobs. Oh, yeah, well, they have jobs, but they're still suffering. They still have little money. And I'm not saying that you have to give them a whole lot of money, like you have to make them millionaires, or give them houses or whatever. But oftentimes they don't care about the people, and that doesn't help the people.
Strongly disagree. Radio. What's good for the most successful corporations is always, ultimately, good for all of us. Form. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Checked. 2 of 4.
So I disagree.
Agree. Strong. No broadcasting institution, however independent.
But I also have caveats as well.
Content should. Strong. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Form start.
I once actually agreed with this, but I don't actually agree with it, especially if the content is truly educational. I would also have a caveat of being extremely wary of bias towards a certain position that maybe the government holds, or maybe a bias towards the government, so that they wouldn't necessarily report things that the government that's unfavorable to the government. Not necessarily that they're doing it in a malicious, or that they're deliberately lying about things, but it's been shown that doctors that go to these meetings with companies that sell different pills. It's been shown that these doctors have a bias towards these companies, and they don't even realize it. So that's my caveat as well. You have to be very careful, and I'm not sure how you would do that. So
strongly agree. Radio button. Agree. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Form start.
So I mostly disagree, but I also understand, and I do agree in some ways as well.
Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2. Checked. Agree. Strongly agree. Radio. Next page. Button. End. Article. Next page. End. Article. End. Main. Open navigate. Hyphen. Link. Take the test. Visit. Strongly disagree. Radio. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Form start.
Definitely agree.
Agree. Strongly agree. Radio button. Unchecked. 4 of 4. Checked.
And to be honest, it doesn't work. Not because there's more terrorism, but because terrorism isn't really a threat to begin with, to be completely honest with you, but that's another subject.
A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Form start.
I guess, but what kind of system would that be? There'd be no innovation, there'd be no new ideas, which is exactly the problem I have with the two-party system that we have now. I honestly think we should have no parties at all, and that everybody should, vote based on what they think instead of some party. But that's probably never going to happen.
A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Form start. Strong disagree. Radio button.
So I disagree mostly because it'll create a lack of innovation and a sort of lack of enthusiasm and a sort of lack of hell. Why do you think there's so few people voting today? It's because this two-party system that we have is not that they're the exact same, but they're so unoriginal. They're so innovative, and they're so just rigid and dogmatic that people are just tired of it, and so they don't vote. That's the reason.
A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all.
And I can't blame them.
Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4.
So I mostly just disagree because of the lack of innovation thing.
Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Form start. Strongly disagree.
Disagree.
Checked. Strongly agree. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 2 of 4. Checked.
Disagree. An eye for an eye doesn't work. And there's no evidence showing that the death penalty actually stops people from committing crimes. There's no evidence that it doesn't either, but that's another subject.
Strong. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Form start.
Only in a sort of natural way. And what I mean by this is, if you have like say, a, a, a government official who's just like, oh, you do what I say right now. He's doing it in a sort of unnatural way, then it's not going to work. But what I mean by only in a natural way is, say you have like a fire that's happening. There's probably going to be somebody who's going to go, there's a fire here, let's get everybody out of here, and he's going to be leading everybody on. So in that sense, it's going to be in a sort of natural leadership. That's what I'm going to call it.
In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded.
I wouldn't say always, though. I would probably not even say mostly, but sometimes.
Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Disagree. Radio button.
So
Check.
mostly disagree.
Agree. Strongly. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Form start.
Art is subjective, just like comedy. It's one of the things that the left doesn't really seem to understand. Not necessarily the left, but the people who want to ban hate speech, and most of this has to do with comedy. This kind of happened with Count Dankula in Scotland. Some of you might know what I'm talking about, but he made a video where he made his girlfriend's dog do the Heil Hitler salute, the Sieg
Dark sky.
Heil
Now.
thing.
Beach hazard statement.
The Sieg Heil, and then the dog would do this salute, and he'd say, "You want to gas the Jews," and he'd do the salute or whatever. And the reason why he did it is because he wanted his girlfriend thought that the dog was pretty or whatever, and he wanted to teach it the ugliest thing he knew, which was to make it, Hitler, make it a Nazi. So it was a joke about how Nazis are horrible, and the government, instead of showing that context, tried to make it seem as if he was actually supporting Hitler and supporting Nazi, and he even said in the video that that's not what he was doing. He was teaching the dog the worst thing he could think of, which was a Nazi. So comedy is subjective. Now, if you want to argue that it was a dumb joke or was a really dumb thing to do, fine. I don't necessarily think I disagree, but should it be illegal? I don't necessarily think it should. I mean, you can make the argument too that somebody might see that and agree with it and laugh, but you can't really stop people from thinking stupid things or bad things. I don't care what you do.
Strongly agree. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered. Disagree. Radio button.
So I disagree
Checked.
with the abstract art thing.
Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Form start. Agree. Strong. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. Form start. Strong. Disagree. Radio.
Disagree.
Checked. Agree. Strong. It is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Strong. Disagree. Radio. Checked.
Disagree.
Agree. Strongly agree. Radio. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. Form start. Strong. Disagree. Radio. Checked.
Disagree.
Agree. Strongly agree. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Form. Strong. Disagree. Radio.
Disagree.
Checked. Strongly. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Form start.
Depending on what ethics. This is the problem with this question, is that there's so many different types of ethics. I don't really want to get into a discussion of specific types of ethics, but there's different types of ethics. There's virtue ethics, which is totally different from so there's this one kind of ethics which I don't really agree with. I don't subscribe to a specific type of ethics, but there's this one type of ethics that says that a sort of innate selfishness is actually ethical and actually is good, and helps people and whatnot.
TUMBLR. Now. Good news.
And you could make this.
Introverted Bookworm 24 is posting again.
You could kind of make this argument for this particular unethical thing. And I would probably disagree with it, but it's ethics. Ethics has many different branches, so the question is kind of dumb. I mean, I understand what they're saying, but the question assumes that there's only one types of There's only one type of ethics, and there's so many different types of ethics. Although I think I think they just mean the ethics that, the general idea of ethics.
Strongly agree. Radio button. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Form start.
And as far as that goes, I don't actually know if that's true or not, but I could see how it's possible. I probably say disagree because
Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Checked.
I don't think they're actually using those anymore. They're actually using genetically modified plants now, which some say are actually harmful. Which, honestly, there's evidence. There's people who say that's not true. There's people who say it is true. I see kind of both sides on this one, but
Strongly. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. Form start.
they just say genetic resources too. I think I'd still kind of disagree because, but I can also kind of agree. So I partly disagree.
Strongly agree. Radio. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Form start.
I mostly disagree, but in some ways I kind of agree. But only in the sense of violently going against the government. There's this movement, like the Antifa movement, who think violence is the way to deal with, getting rid of the government. They're anarcho-communists, basically, which means that they're communists, but they're communists in the sense that no government will be involved. And the communism and the way that they think they can get this anarcho-communism is by violence. And there's been cases caught on live video where they do this. There's a journalist that was put in the hospital by Antifa people because they were, they're against him and whatnot. And I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I'm not a fan of that either. So
Strongly agree. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity.
I mostly disagree, but I also kind of agree in that particular case and other kinds of cases, I guess, like that.
Strong disagree. Radio button. Checked. Agree. Strong. Next page. Average. Next page. Button. Next page. End. Article. End. Main. Open navigation. Checkbox. Test. Link. Hyphen. Link. Strongly disagree. Astrology accurately explains many things. Form start.
Probably not. But if you believe in... okay, so I'll make this argument. Only in the sense that it describes you. Like, say you look at your so-called zodiac sign, and if there's things in there that describe you, that's good. And then you look at the other signs, and if there's things in there that describe you, that's good. What you do is you look at all these different things that describe you, either write them down or say them somewhere, whatever. As well as other types of personality types, like the Myers-Briggs, type. You look at all their types on that, and whatever describes you there, no matter what personality type is, keep that all in your notes or whatever, and that's how you can kind of build a sort of self-awareness. But in that sense, it can be helpful, but only necessarily in that sense. Not that I don't think that it can't predict the future, and if it does for you, that's fine and great. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. That's my caveat on that one. So
page 5. Astrology accurately explains many things. Forms. Strongly disagree. Radio.
Mostly disagree, I guess. Because of that, because of my other caveats, it doesn't work necessarily in this case.
Agree. Strongly agree. You cannot be moral without being religious. Form start.
Strongly disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio. Checked. Disagree. Strongly agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. Form start.
I do kind of agree, but I also understand that that's not always it's not going to work in every case. It's not going to completely work. So I agree, but not completely.
Strong. Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Unchecked. Checked. Strong. Some people are naturally unlucky. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio.
No.
Checked.
That's probably not true.
Agree. Strong. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Form start. Strongly disagree.
No.
Checked. Agree. Strong. Next page. Button. End. Article. Next page. End. Article. End. Main. Open navigation. Strongly disagree. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Form start. Finally, a look at sex. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Form start.
I would say. Okay. So. So I have a couple problems with this particular test. And this one is a good example of this. Because it says sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Does that mean you're having sex and you're not married? Or you're having sex and you are married? If you are married, I would say yes, kind of. Well, no, I would say, well, it depends on what your perspective is. If you're like a polyamorous or something, that's totally different. But if you're in a committed monogamous relationship, then yeah, probably. But only in like the sense of your own particular perspective.
Finally, a look at sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 1 of 4. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. Form start.
I wouldn't say usually, though.
Disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. Checked. Agree. Strongly agree. Radio button. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Form start. Strongly disagree. Radio button. Unchecked. 3. Checked.
I agree. I think it should be mostly more upon how stable they are, how balanced they are. And I know this sounds weird because, you have parents that to actual children that are like imbalanced and unstable, but when you're dealing with children and you're the government or whatever, you have a responsibility not to, and I know this is hard to do, so I'm not saying I'm not really rigid on this necessarily, but I think you have a responsibility to find parents that are at least a little bit stable, at least a little bit, and that's one of the things I think should be taught in high school and in school as well, how to become stable, how to become a well-rounded person, how to become mentally healthy. It's not really taught in school. It might be nowadays. It wasn't really not when I was in school. I don't think it's taught in school because I see kids acting all kinds of ways, and I think part of that has to do with parents. But the parents themselves may have the same problems. They don't necessarily know how to behave themselves. I'm not saying they're irresponsible or they don't know how to behave, but they're going to be doing things in private that are going to be influencing these children, which it causes part of their behaviors.
Disagree. Agree. Radio button. Checked.
That's
3 of 4.
story.
Strongly agree. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Strongly disagree. Agree. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Form start. Disagree. Radio.
Oh man, this is kind of a controversial one because I say I'd mostly agree, but with some caveats of sorts, because I've been hearing some really, really bad things about the industry of porn itself. That there's a lot of human trafficking involved in porn. That it involves a lot of people who were abused as children, and because of that abuse, they feel like they have no other sort of recourse to get love and attention than to be in porn and whatnot. I'm not saying that that's bad necessarily, that second part, but it's not good either. So I mostly agree, but with those, you have to clean up the industry. Also, too, I suppose, is a sort of another thing you can kind of add. Although with this one, there's probably going to be workarounds around it. But to have some kind of an ID system to to make sure that only adults watch the porn itself. Although I don't really know how you would enforce that. I don't know how you would set that up, but that would be another sort of caveat, I suppose, I'd have.
Strongly agree. Radio button. Checked. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Form start. Disagree. Radio button. Checked.
I mostly agree. Unless the person's being abused or whatever. Unless the person wants to be abused, in which case, more power to them, I guess. In which case, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be an abuse at that point. Great, I think I just got the coronavirus. But I mostly agree. I'm trying to think of where that could be a problem, but I don't see anything at the moment.
Strongly agree. Radio button. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Form start.
I disagree.
Strongly disagree. Radio. Checked.
From what I know of other people who are homosexual, they say it's natural. Although one controversial homosexual says it's not natural, but I don't really want to get into that because he's kind of odd as it is. It's complicated.
Strongly disagree. These days openness about sex has gone too far. Form start.
Okay. In a sense, I mostly don't disagree. In a sense, I actually mostly disagree. But in a sense, I do kind of agree. I actually do kind of agree. And my reasons have nothing to do with the fact that sex is immoral or anything like this. It has mostly to do with that sex ed is being taught to very, very, very young children who, I'm not saying that they don't necessarily know anything about this subject, and I'm not saying not to teach them sex ed, but to teach them only certain things, because they're not going to understand it and they're going to be more confused, and I'm not sure how much good it's going to do. So, as far as the teach them only certain things goes, teach them about their current level of understanding when it comes to sexuality. I don't really know how you would find that out. Maybe you would have to test them in some way, but that would give them more information than you would have. Maybe you would look to the scientists and psychologists about this. Maybe they would know more about this information. Maybe some kind of developmental psychologist could tell us where they would be in certain ages or whatever, and we could work with that to teach them about, sexuality at that particular age. But I don't know. That's complicated.
Strongly. These days openness about sex has gone too far. Form start.
So I mostly disagree with that caveat of that happening. And with this problem that I've talked about already of sex being thought of and seen as so lightly. It shouldn't be seen this lightly. It's kind of disturbing. It's not disturbing, but it's kind of concerning, because you have because
These days strongly disagree. Radio button. Check. These days openness about sex has gone too far. Form start.
My thinking on this is that sex should be an intimate thing. Well, not necessarily should be, but it should be, a serious thing. And it's not really seen as a serious thing by a lot of people, a lot of liberals. A lot of conservatives go a little too far with it, and they're like, oh, well, it's just completely immoral and all these things. I don't disagree. I don't agree with that, but I don't agree with the other positions either. And I don't necessarily know what their positions are exactly, but from how I've seen them act in regards to sex, and I'm not saying that they're wrong for acting this way, but I've noticed that it seems that they don't seem to take it as seriously as I think they probably should. Sex is a responsibility. I mean, when you decide to have sex with somebody, you're having a connection with that person. It's not something to take lightly. That's something that you should really kind of think about. Maybe this person isn't right for you, or maybe you could get this person, be pregnant or whatever. You have to be very, very careful. Maybe the person takes birth control, or maybe you can. That's the other sort of discussion I could sort of go into. It's one of the problems with the abortion itself is that, not that I disagree with abortion, but there's so many other options for contraception. There's birth control, there's the morning after pill, there's the diaphragm, and all these different other things. I think the abortion should be almost like the last resort if you really don't want this kid. So there's that to kind of contemplate as well. But for the most part, I don't really care what people think. They can, think what they do. They can do whatever they want to do, for the most part.
Strong disagree. Agree. Radio. Strongly agree. Now let's see where you stand. Button. End. Article. Now let's see where you stand. End. Article. End. Main. Reader available. Open navigation. Single left right axis. Image. If we recognize that this is essentially an economic line, it's fine. Single left right in the about the political compass. The political compass. Link. Banner. Landmark. Home. Screen curtain on.
All right. So I can't really see it. I don't really know where I am, but I'm probably assuming I'm pretty left.
About the political compass. Heading level. In the introduction, we explained the inadequacies of the traditional left-right line. Single left right axis. Image. If we recognize that this is essentially an economic line, it's fine as far as it goes. We can show, for example.
Okay, so the way that they work is they have libertarian, authoritarian, and left and right. And I actually kind of agree with their ideas in some ways, but I also think it's a little too simplistic because, although I think the same thing about politics in general anyways, but that's another story.
That deals Cartesian plane, both an economic dimension and a social dimension. That deals with economics, but the social dimension is also, if we recognize that this is essentially an economic line, it's fine as far as it goes. We can show, for example, Stalin, Mao Zedong, and Pol Pot with their commitment to a totally controlled economy on the hard left. Socialists like Mahatma Gandhi and Robert Mugabe would occupy a less extreme leftist position. Margaret Thatcher would be well over to the right, but further right still would be someone like that ultimate free marketeer, General Pinochet. That deals with economics, but the social dimension is also important in politics. That's the one that the mere left-right scale doesn't adequately address. So we've added one, ranging in positions from extreme authoritarian to extreme libertarian. Cartesian plane with horizontal left-right axis and vertical. Both an economic dimension and a social dimension are important factors for a proper political analysis. By adding the social dimension, you can show that Stalin was an authoritarian leftist, i.e. the state is more important than the individual, and that Gandhi, believing in the supreme value of each individual, is a liberal leftist. You can also put Pinochet, who is the chart also makes clear that, despite chart with Stalin, Gandhi, Friedman, Thacker, Hitler, image. The usual understanding of anarchism as a left-wing ideology does not take into account the neoliberal anarchism championed by the likes of Ayn Rand, Milton Friedman, and America's Libertarian Party, which couples social Darwinian right-wing economics with liberal positions on most social. In our homepage, we demolish the myth that authoritarianism. A word about in our homepage, we demolish the myth that authoritarianism is necessarily right-wing, with the examples of Robert Mugabe, Pol Pot, and Stalin. Similarly, Hitler, on an economic scale, was not an extreme right-winger. His economic policies were broadly Keynesian and to the left of some of today's labor parties. If you could get Hitler and Stalin to sit down together and avoid economics, the two die-hard authoritarians would find plenty of common ground. A word U.S. Your political compass. Heading economic left/right -1. So economic left/right -1.0. Heading level 2.
I don't know what that means, but it actually sounds kind of right.
Social libertarian/authoritarian -6.0. Heading level 2. Personalized chart. So economic left/right -1.0. Heading level 2.
Economic left/right. So that might be more center. But I'm not sure.
Social libertarian/authoritarian -6.0. Heading level 2.
So that sounds more
Social libertarian/authoritarian -6.0. Heading level 2.
libertarian, maybe? I don't know. Or authoritarian, maybe. I think it's libertarian, but I'm not sure.
Personal. Show chart in a separate window for printing. Political compass. Search. Show personalized chart. Image. End. Article. Show political compass certificate. Heading level 1. A personalized political compass certificate. Join 27 characters of your most loved and loathed political figures in a. It's beautifully designed by Trump2.png image. After you take the test, you will be presented with a link which will take you to the certificate page. Alternatively, you can.
Alright, so we did this one, and I know we've gone on pretty long, but I'm going to do another one. It's called the 8 values test, which I actually like better because it goes into a lot more. It has a lot better questions. I don't really like this one as much.
Address.
For a couple
Politicalcompass.org.
reasons. So
Address.
let's go.
Address. Text field. Clear text. Button. Clear text.
I don't know if it's there anymore, but let's see.
Text select. Braille screen input. Orientation locked. Landscape. Home button to the right. W. Dots 2456. Dots 388. V. A. L. U. E. S. Value. T. E. Street. Test. Space. Reader available. Portrait. Reader available. Format options. Button. Show 8 values test. Text field.
So,
Double tap to edit. Use the rotor to access misspelled words.
let's plug this back in. Yeah, so this has already gone probably pretty close to an hour or more. Wait, what's going on here? Is this thing now? Hold on.
VPN screen recording no TP VPN on 0 orientation locked 100% battery power charging status bar item videos link.
Not that I need it, but I just want to make sure that I don't run out of battery tonight. Later today, I'm probably gonna be up all damn day. So let's see.
Links. Headings. 8 values. Heading level 2. Search domain 8 values. GitHub 8 values. Heading level 2. / reader available. Image. Reader available. Safari. View 8 value. Separate. Click here to start. Equality. Click here to start. Button. Separator. Dimmed. Click here to start. Click here to start. 8. Separator. Dimmed. Instructions. Heading level. You will be presented with a series of statements. For each one, click the button with your opinion on it. Got it. Button. Wait. Never. Got it. Button. Got it.
Alright, so just wait for it to load. It's taking a while.
8 values. Heading level 1.
There it goes.
Separator. Dimmed. Question 1 of 70. Heading. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments.
I think they're both of a concern.
Strongly agree. Button. Neutral / disagree. Button. Neutral / unsure. Button. Oppression by question 1 is oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments.
I honestly think they're both as equally as problematic. So I'm trying to think of which one is worse in terms of like specific types of examples, but I probably would say that governments would be worse because governments do seem to have more power, but then again, corporations lately have seemed to have a lot of power as well.
Strong agree. Button. Strongly agree. Button. Oppression by corporations is more of a concern than oppression by governments. Agree. Neutral / disagree. Button.
So I'm going to say mostly disagree, but with the caveat that corporate oppression is just as bad, or almost as bad, because I do think that government oppression is pretty bad as well.
Disagree. It is necessary for the government to question 1. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Question. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. Strongly agree. Button.
I partly agree, but with serious nuances and context that I don't really feel like going into, because we could be here for 10 hours, for 10, 20 hours talking about that.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. The freer the markets, the freer the people.
I've talked about that already. I mostly agree with that statement.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens.
Yes. Well, I would prefer to try and do both, but that's probably impractical. So I would probably mostly agree, but with the caveat that I would try and do my best to get welfare, deal with the welfare of my citizens. So there's the caveat as I talked about before.
It is better to maintain a balance. Strongly agree. It is better. Strongly agree. Button. Agree.
Semi-agree.
Strongly agree. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market.
I don't think it really matters. I mean, I'm sure it matters a little bit, but God damn it, David. Just knocked over the fan. Move this over a little bit. Do this. Alright. So, I don't think it matters as much as people might think. But I do think that public research is probably, in many ways, better. But in some ways, it could be worse. And the same for, research done by corporations or whatever. In a lot of ways, I think corporational research could be worse.
Question 1 of 70. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to the people than leaving it to the market.
I do think that's probably true.
Agree. Button.
But, again, how do you do that? All these things without having a balanced budget. You have to find a middle ground. So, I kind of agree, but with a serious caveat, so...
Agree. Neutral/unsure. Button. Neutral/unsure.
Oops. Well, that's probably true anyways.
Question 1.
Let me go back.
Back. Button. Back. Button. Strongly. Back. Forward. Dimmed. Back. Button. Back. Publicly funded research is more beneficial to... Strong. Agree. Button. Agree.
Yes.
Tariffs on international trade are important to encourage local production.
I would mostly disagree. But I can understand how that can be a problem. For sure. So, I'd mostly agree. I'd disagree with some caveats, I guess.
Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Button. Disagree. Strongly agree. Button. From each. Question 1 is from each according to his ability to each according to his needs.
We talked about that. Agree, but with some serious with some serious caveats and serious nuances and contexts.
Strongly agree. Button. Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Strong. Agree. Neutral/unsure. Button.
As I said before, kind of, but it would never happen to that degree. Not until we completely change how we see ourselves in the world, and not until we completely change our metaphysics. And that's something really hard to explain, and I don't really think we have time on this episode. I'm trying to shorten this as much as possible without skipping over too much, so...
Neutral/unsure. Agree. Strongly agree. Button. It would be best if social programs were abolished in favor of private charity. Strong. Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor.
To some extent. Well, to some extent, but I don't think that should be the only solution. I don't even think that should be the main solution. I think there should be other things that could be done more effectively than to do that. I've heard some good ideas about this. You could make scholarships for people who are poor so they can go to college easier. You could do things like this. You could help them get jobs easier. You could help them deal with addictions easier. All these different types of things. I think those things would work better, and you could use that rich taxes to do that for sure. And the other problem I've noticed, I've heard of, I don't know how sure this is all in every single area, but in a lot of areas, I know this is probably true, where even if this is done, which it is, it's not done in regards to education. I'm meaning that rich neighborhoods have better public education than poorer neighborhoods because they go off of the property taxes of the area. I don't think that should be the way it should be done. I think it should be equal.
Question. Taxes should be increased on the rich to provide for the poor.
So I'm kind of agree.
Agree. Neutral/unsure. Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. Strong. Agree. Button.
Yeah.
Control center.
Sure. God damn it.
Agree. Strongly agree. Address. Format. Address. 8 values. Separator. Dim. Question 1 of 7. Inheritance is a legitimate form of wealth. Strongly agree. Button. Agree.
Yes.
Strongly. Basic utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned.
I'm not sure. I get it to a certain extent, yes. But I don't understand. I don't see why a private utility can't exist as long as they have as long as they're regulated, as long as they're, not charging you an arm and a leg because they have no regulations, or they have regulatory capture. Although there is also problems with regulation too, but that's another story. But I don't really see why not. I don't really see why a private utility can't exist.
Basic utilities like roads and electricity should be publicly owned. Strongly agree. Neutral / unsure. Disagree. Button.
But also with some caveats there.
Disagree. Government intervention is a threat to the economy.
Sometimes. But sometimes can help the economy. So I'm kind of neutral. I'm going to put neutral on this one.
Agree. Neutral / unsure. Button. Neutral / unsure. Strongly agree. Button.
See, this is why I like this one better, because with the other one, you don't really have neutral. You don't really have partly agrees. You don't really have it with this one, but you can use strongly disagree and disagree as partly or completely agree, or disagree or whatever. And the questions are usually better. There's a lot more detail and a lot more that goes into this one.
Strongly agree. Button. Those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare. Those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare.
As I said before, yes, but with some caveats. If you are getting this healthcare at the expense of other people, and I don't know exactly how this could be done, but this could be if serious people are being hurt and your extra expensive healthcare includes you going beyond those people and you're not hurt, then I disagree with that. I totally disagree with that. I mean, I don't think that would necessarily be the case, but things like that.
Question: those with a greater ability to pay should receive better healthcare.
But mostly, I guess I can kind of agree.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. Quality education is a right of all people. Quality education is a right of all people.
This sounds kind of like a Bernie Sanders thing. And my answer is kind of, but also the way the education system's set up, it really doesn't matter anyways. The education system is shit. Excuse my language, but it's not very good. But I still think that it should be anyways. But well, I was about to go into the free college thing. Not that I disagree with it, but there's some problems with, how do you do that without overloading the budget and doing all these problems. Actually, that was a good idea.
Question 1: quality education is a right of all people.
Let me just agree with this.
Agree. Neutral / unsure. Agree. Button. Agree.
So there was an idea that was actually proposed by this journalist that I don't know if it was his idea necessarily, but this guy that I follow on his YouTube channel, he talked about this a while back. But this idea that instead of complete debt forgiveness, which I actually do agree with more. He had this idea of freezing the debt, so that the debt is not overloading them. And the reason why he suggested this, and I think he might have a point here, is that if you just have complete debt forgiveness or loan forgiveness, where's the responsibility? You're not teaching these people responsibility, and so they're not going to be responsible. They're not going to understand, life lessons about money, like how money works and things like that. Like I did. Like I had to learn the hard way that if you don't budget money, if you don't do it right, you can end up in debt. I mean, I ended up debt. It happens. You have to figure this stuff out on your own. If you just get this stuff forgiven, who's to say they're going to learn this? They're just going to think, oh, the government's just going to bail me out. That'll be cool. And that's not really a good thing to do. It's not a really good attitude.
Strongly agree. Button. The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. Strongly agree.
I don't necessarily agree, but I don't necessarily disagree agree either. It depends on what the thing is. It depends on what they're doing. It depends on who developed the product more. The person who owned the company, some other person in the company, or maybe some other worker that's like a factory worker or something. And I think that person should get. Although when they're talking about means of production, I think they're talking more about, and that I don't necessarily agree with, but I don't necessarily think that it should be completely the company owner who owns it. I think it should be whoever made it should own it, or at least part of it, like part of the profit that comes from it.
The means of production should belong to the workers who use them. Strongly agree. Button.
So, kind of disagree. Only because I know what they're talking about, and I don't think that type of thing sponsors innovation. But I do kind of agree, because I do think that letting the person who made the product own the product and get the profit from the product. And I'm not saying that the owner doesn't get some of that profit as well, but I think the owner, the maker of the product, should get more of the profit than the owner does. The owner of the company, because the owner, depending on how much money the owner of the company sink into it too, obviously, but that's just my own personal opinion.
Strongly agree. The means of production should belong to the workers. Strongly agree. Neutral. Disagree. Button.
So I'm going to say disagree because I know where they're going, and I don't think that works. Doesn't sponsor innovation.
Disagree. Question 1 of 70. Heading. Strongly agree. The United Nations should be abolished.
I disagree. But I don't think that the United Nations is very effective anyways. They're more effective than the League of Nations, but I don't think they're very effective. I think they're pretty corrupt, honestly.
The United Nations should be abolished. Strongly agree. Neutral / disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. Button. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it.
I don't think so.
Question 1 of 70. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it.
Although it depends on what you mean by military action. If you mean, if you're being invaded, your borders are being invaded, then sure. Yeah, you have to protect your nation. But if your borders are not being invaded, no. Hell no. And the reason why I'm saying that is because your violence begets more violence. Violence begets violence. And, this doesn't solve the situation. It doesn't fix anything. Now, if they're trying to get into your borders, yeah. If they're trying to sabotage your technology or whatever, if they're trying to hack into your computer systems or whatever, defend yourself against it, but don't retaliate. That's exactly what people are doing. This is exactly what countries are doing. It's not working. It's actually worsening conflict throughout the world.
Question. Military action by our nation is often necessary to protect it. Strongly agree. Neutral / unsure. Button. Disagree. Button.
So I'd say mostly disagree.
Disagree. Strongly agree. I support regional unions, such as the European Union.
Depends on the union. Depends on what the union is doing. The European Union is... Some people say it's tyrannical. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's definitely not a union that I'd support, because they don't seem to... Not only do they not seem to have the best interests of Europe at heart, but they don't let other people decide their country's fate. They don't let the countries... I don't think the countries have a say in what the EU does, for the most part. But I'm sure they may, but if they do, that's fine. But I don't think they do as much as they should, if they do.
Question 1 of 70.
But they may to that extent, but I don't think so.
I support regional unions, such as the European Union.
So, I guess I would say yes, but with some serious caveats and nuances here.
Strongly agree. Button. Agree. It is important to maintain our national sovereignty.
To a certain extent, yes. For the moment, yes. And what I mean by that is, it depends on how you're doing that, and it depends on how things change. Eventually, we're going to have a world government. Hopefully, the world government is not going to be tyrannical, but and so hopefully we're not going to have too many conflicts in regards to this. But this is going to be a long time coming. It's probably going to be 100, 200 years down the road, but it's going to happen.
It is important to maintain our national sovereignty. Strongly agree. Button.
So I say mostly agreeable, but with some caveats and stuff.
Agree. A united world government would be beneficial to mankind.
Yes, but with some caveats, obvious, with some serious caveats and serious rules that, like, have to be followed, because otherwise it could be seriously problematic.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. It is more important to retain peaceful relations than to further our strength. Strong agree. Button. Agree.
Yes. Agreed.
Wars do not need to be justified to other countries.
Depends on the country. Depends on what the war is, but I'd mostly say
wars do not need to be justified to other countries.
I disagree, but it depends on the country, because some countries are, I mean, not that they're bad or evil or anything, but they're not necessarily going to be, in a good in our sense as a country. Not saying that justifies anything, but that could be problematical in some way.
Wars do not need to be justified to other countries.
But I mostly disagree.
Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. Military spending is a waste of money.
I disagree, but I do think it should be done differently. I think it should be more about border protection or, nation protection without wars. Unless your nation is threatened, in which case wars, or I would say defense, not wars, but that's all I would say. And I would call it more of a peacekeeping force rather than a military.
Military spending is a waste of money.
So, mostly disagree.
Agree. Neutral / disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. But international aid is a waste of money. I
disagree, but I do think that it's ineffective. Not because of the international aid itself, but because the countries getting it are corrupted, or because of the ways in which it's delivered, or it's not enough. Most countries deliver more national aid than we do. I know a lot of people are going to say, but we spend more money in national aid than they do. Yes, but proportionally, they actually spend more. Proportionally. We don't, proportionally speaking, spend as much as they do. So that's the problem. So that is also true. National foreign aid is, there can be some problems with foreign aid because the nation could be corrupted, or the ways in which it's given is problematical. It could lead to the country's debt if it's done wrongly, especially if it's done in the ways I think it is. I could be wrong about the ways in which I think it's done, but unfortunately, I don't think I am.
Question 1. International aid is a waste of money. Strong agree. Neutral / disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral agree. Strongly agree. Button. My nation is great.
I would say mostly no, but yes. There are great things that this nation does, that this nation is, but only for certain people. And I'm not talking about white people or black people. I'm talking about for mostly just this nation, and to some extent race, or not really even race, but poverty, and race too, to some extent as well, because the top poverty thing is definitely linked to race in some cases. But white people can be just as poor, so it's not just about race. But the nation is great, but it's only great for like certain people. It's only great in certain ways, and it's not great in most other ways. It's problematical. It doesn't serve the whole. And I'm not even talking about the whole of the nation. I'm not even talking about the whole of the world in this case. I'm talking about the whole of the nation. It doesn't even serve the whole of the nation properly. So, no, not really.
Question. My nation is great. Strong. Agree. Neutrals. Disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutrals. Agree. Strongly agree. Research should be conducted on an international scale.
And, you might be saying, well, welfare doesn't really count. I'm not even talking about welfare. I'm not even talking about monetary aid to poor people. I'm talking about the ways in which the nation governs people. I'm talking about the ways in which the nation deals with drug addicts. I'm talking about the way that the nation deals with poor people. I'm talking about the way that the nation deals with education, these other problems. It doesn't deal with these things very well. And it doesn't the way that the nation deals with war. So yeah, it's not very great.
Research should be conducted on it.
But it is great in a lot of ways. I'm not saying that that's really bad or evil, but there's definitely a lot of problems.
Research should be conducted on an international scale.
Sure, I guess. Depending on, the nation or the corruption or the culture, through cultural bias or whatever. It might actually remove some cultural bias.
Strongly agree. Agree. Strong. Research should be conducted on an international. Strong. Agree. Button.
So yeah, I guess I mostly agree.
Agree. Strong. Governments should be accountable to the international community.
I mostly agree, I guess.
Agree. Neutral / unsure. Agree. Button. Strongly agree. Button. Agree. Strong. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable.
I mostly agree. Unless the government is violent towards you, or the government is known to be violent towards you, and that doesn't mean that I excuse violence that is done, even if the government is doing no violence to you in that moment. I don't excuse it in that case either, but depending on how authoritarian the government is, sometimes the only really way to deal with the government isn't necessarily to be violent, but to be brutal against the government. I don't know necessarily how you would deal with this without necessarily being violent, but the Chinese government is a really good example of this, unfortunately. And it's a really hard thing. It's a really complicated issue to really go into or know exactly how to deal with this problem without, overdoing it or underdoing it.
Question. Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence is not acceptable.
But I think I'd mostly agree.
Even when protesting an authoritarian government, violence. Strongly agree. Button. Agree. My religious values should be spread as much as possible. Strong. Agree. Neutral. Strong. Back. Button. Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree. Button. Strongly disagree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible. Strong. Agree. Neutral / unsure. Button.
I kind of agree, but only kind of. And only, I don't know. I don't even know if I agree, because we don't even follow our own damn values. And the values that we do follow aren't exactly promising. Aren't exactly, good values. Aren't exactly values that are helping people. As much as some of the purported values that we actually have. I'm not saying that we don't have them, but we don't seem to have them. Our government doesn't seem to have them as much as the rest of us seem to, or at least most of us seem to.
Agree. Neutral slash unsure. Agree. Strongly agree. Our nation's values should be spread as much as possible.
But I would kind of agree to a certain extent, and with some serious caveats there.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strongly. It is very important to maintain law and order.
You kind of agree, but with some caveats there. Not to like extremes or whatever.
It is very important to maintain. Strongly agree. Button. Agree. Strongly. The general populace makes poor decisions.
If you mean like in a crowd-worthy sense, then kind of. But if you mean like individually speaking, then not always. Although, what I mean by crowd-worthy sense may be in a different way than most people think of crowd-worthy sense. And unfortunately, most people do seem to be locked into this sort of understanding, this sort of problem. So what I mean by crowd-worthy sense is like group consciousness, like you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, and I'm not saying that you're dumb for being Democrat or Republican, but it leads to doesn't lead to innovation and original thinking. It doesn't lead to independence, independent minds. I don't care what you want to say. I don't care if you think you're libertarian or conservative. If you believe in independence or independent minds or whatever you believe in, you're not independent. I really don't care what you think. You're not independent when you're dealing with politics. If you're set in this group mentality. I mean, a lot of these individualistic libertarian types are stuck in a sort of worldview, and they think that they have this oversimplified understanding of reality that doesn't really exist. Not saying that they're completely wrong. I actually agree with a lot of the things that they say, but I also think that they're wrong on some of the things they say, and I think that they're missing important information, or that they're half right on some of the things they say. So, there's nuances here as well.
Question 1 of 7. The general populace makes poor decisions.
So I'd say, kind of, if you mean like as in, like crowd-worthiness. And unfortunately, most people seem to be stuck in that kind of mentality, of group mentality. But also no. But even if you're like not stuck necessarily in a group mentality, you still have a problem. So kind of.
Question 1 of 70.
Kind
the
of
general strongly agree. Agree. Button.
So kind of agree.
Agree. Strong physician-assisted suicide should be legal. Strongly
Yes.
agree. Button. Strongly agree.
Although I guess I could add some caveats on this one of like, if you're like 20 years old and if you have no illnesses or anything like that, I guess then if you want to say that this person shouldn't do that, then I guess I can kind of agree. I don't know. I mean, I don't care. They can do whatever they want with their life. If they want to commit suicide or with physician or otherwise, that's fine. I don't really care. But if you don't think it's a good idea, I don't know if I necessarily disagree, but I don't necessarily say I'd agree either. So
The strongly agree. Button. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is necessary to protect us from acts of terrorism.
I disagree because I don't think terrorism is as big as a threat as people think it is.
Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Button. Disagree.
But I do concede that it can be, and it can be a problem, but it's not as big as a problem as people seem to think it is. And if, in fact, I'd argue that the reason why it's such a big problem in the first place is because of the way that we're acting against terrorism. But that's another story.
Agree. Strongly agree. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. Question. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world.
Probably true, unfortunately. But sometimes, fortunately, I mean, you can really find some good, you can really solve some crimes because of, although that can also be problematic as well, because you have there's this case that has come up, and now people are automatically coming to conclusions based on this little bit of evidence they have, this grainy footage, and now things are coming out that prove their conclusions are, if not wrong, then misguided and not completely correct. And both sides of the aisle on this one are wrong, especially on this particular instance. Some of them are right on the conservative side and the liberal side, but most of them are arguing from emotion and looking at things from emotion, unfortunately.
Question 1 of 6. Separate. Question. Government surveillance is necessary in the modern world. Strong. Agree. Button.
So, yeah, I guess I mostly agree.
Agree.
My last argument, I don't really know why I made that, but just something that happens a lot of times.
Strong. The very existence of the state is a threat to our liberty.
Oh, that's interesting. I would probably say kind of. I would say yes, but also that it's also causing our liberty. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? It's kind of strange. But yeah,
Strongly
I kind
agree.
of agree.
Button. Agree. Button.
I guess I can mostly agree with that.
Agree. Question 1 of 70. Heading level. Regardless of political opinions, it is important to side with your country.
No. No.
Neutral. Disagree. Strong. Back. Button. Strong. Disagree. Button. Disagree.
For the most part, no.
Agree. Button. Strongly agree. All authority should be questioned. Strongly
Yes.
agree. Button. Agree. Strongly agree. The hierarchical state is best. Strongly agree. Button.
I don't necessarily agree, actually. But I don't necessarily disagree. But my ideas would be hard to implement anyway, so my ideas are more suited to a sort of communal leading anyway, so it would be harder to do for the state.
The hierarchical state is best. Strongly agree. Button.
So maybe partly agree, at least for the time being, at least for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 100, 200 years, and by that point we probably reached a higher state, probably stage yellow or something, hopefully by that point.
Agree. Strongly agree. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion, even if it is wrong.
No. And the reason is because we're not a democracy. Democracies poison people. I'm not joking. I'm not being hyperbolic. It literally happened in Greece. But democracy, which basically, for those who don't know what democracy means, is that the majority of the people get a say on what is done, what laws are made or whatever, or the people do get a say. And the majority, in the case of meaning in Greece, like slaves and things like that, I don't think got this treatment. I don't think women did either, probably. So, and you may think that's a good thing, but you could think of it this way. Say you have 300 people in your country, and 278 of them wanted to take your land away. Take 22 people's land away because they're I'm trying to think of like a really bad example. I don't mean bad as in like a flawed argument. I mean a bad example, like, because this can happen where democracies can, and to be honest, the same thing can happen here, but in a republic, the minorities are and can be more protected. This is why we have a Senate and the House, so that we don't have a situation where the biggest states overrule what the smaller rural states say. This is the same thing with the way that the electoral college is done. This is so that the smaller states don't smaller states' votes basically don't become pointless, and so that they actually have a say. Of course, the way that that system is done can be changed. It's a little archaic, but the system itself is a good system for the most part.
Question. Separator. Question. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion, even if it is wrong. Strong. Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Button. Disagree.
Mostly disagree.
Strong. The stronger the leadership, the better. Strong. Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strong. Democracy is more than a decision-making process.
Yes.
Strongly agree. Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. Question 1 of 7. Environmental regulations are essential. Question. Environmental regulations are essential.
Yes, but I have a way different view about this than most people. Not necessarily that I'm completely different, but I don't necessarily know or think that the ideas that a lot of the left have about how to regulate like climate change and stuff like that will necessarily work. I'm not saying that they won't work. I'm just saying that they're not going to be. I don't think they're completely effective. I don't think they're completely going to do what they're supposed to do. I think I don't know. I think there's a lot more that's not being talked about as far as laws and rules and stuff like that are concerned when it comes to climate change. I think the subject is so taboo to go against the narrative that the left has. That whenever you question climate change, you're called a climate change denier and all these terms. And I'm not denying climate change, but I'm denying this problem that this idea that these simple solutions are going to fix this problem, because I don't think they will. I don't necessarily think they won't. I'm not saying that either, but I'm just don't think that they're completely effective.
Question. Environmental regulations are essential.
But I do think they are essential.
Agree. Button. Agree.
In some ways.
A better world will come from automation, science, and technology.
I do agree with that, but I do think that it could also lead down a very sort of... It could lead down a couple of dangerous roads that might have to be sort of dealt with and balanced out in some way. I don't know how you do that with a field like automation and science and whatnot. You could have a world like Mad Max or something, but that was one of the things I liked about Andrew Yang, is he was talking about this. The problem with automation and how to deal with this problem. And I don't know if his solutions are necessarily the best, but it is one of the things that, and this is one of the things that I do disagree with a lot of the left on as well, is this. They have a lot of these blanket laws that they want to put in place, like minimum wage. And I'm not saying I'm against minimum wage. They have laws like minimum wage, Medicare for all. I'm not saying that I'm against some kind of base level care for everybody who needs it. Like if you have a broken arm, I don't want you to go to a hospital and then end up paying out of your ass because of the way the system is set up. I think that for things that that are serious, you need help for that, and you shouldn't be charged out of the ass for it. I'm not saying that it should be free necessarily. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be something that you go into debt because of. But back to what I was saying.
Question 1 of 7. A better world will come from automation, science, and technology.
Oh yeah, so I'd say mostly agree on this one.
Strong. Agree. Button. Agree.
I'm going on rambles here.
Children should be educated in religious or traditional values.
No, I disagree.
Strongly disagree. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Strongly disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strong. Traditions are of no value on their own.
I mostly agree.
Strong. Agree. Button. Agree.
they have value and how effective they are at doing at helping people or that's complicated and nuanced. I don't really want to go into that. It'll take forever.
Strongly agree. Button. Religion. Question 1 of 7. Separator. Question. Religion should play a role in government. Agree.
No.
Strongly disagree. Button. Strongly disagree.
And I don't really want to go into this, but I might as well since we're talking about this. This is one of the problems that I have with a lot of the conservatives is they want to get rid of abortion. They want to do all these things. They have been doing this. Now there's all kinds of different laws and things that are now in place that are more stringent against abortion. I'm not saying that abortion is wrong, that abortion is right, or that everybody should get an abortion or anything. Abortion, yay! No, I'm not saying this. I'm saying that is not a good idea, and this is part of your religious values. I don't think that should be part of the government either. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but I can see both sides here. I don't really understand why it has to go to such extremes, but I understand the reasons.
Disagree. Button. Neutrals. Agree. Button. Strongly agree. Churches should be taxed the same way other institutions are taxed.
I actually agree with that too. With a caveat of sorts, and the caveat mostly being that if you are actually helping the community, you can get deductibles and whatnot, depending on how much you're helping the community and whatnot. So there's that caveat, I guess.
Strongly agree. Button.
Although I guess I'd always be there.
Agree. Button. Agree. Climate change. Question 1 is climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our way of life.
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's not true. There's a lot of people who are saying that the world's going to end in 12 years because of climate change. I'm sorry, but that's always been said. They've always been saying things like this for 30 years. Oh, the world's going to end in 5 years because of climate change. The world's going to end in 7 years, 10 years, 12 years. I'm sorry, but they don't. That's not necessarily true. The computer generated models that have been created to try and track how climate change can and does affect. So basically what I'm talking about is that they have these computer generated models that try and predict the future of what climate change is going to do to the planet and whatnot. And a lot of those computer generated models have been wrong. They've been completely wrong. Not that there hasn't been I wouldn't say spike, but an increase in temperature. And I'm not denying that. But the computer generated models can and often are wrong. And I don't know if we should necessarily rely on those to predict the end of the world. Not to mention, I really can't stand that phrase anyways, but it's another story.
Climate change is currently one of the greatest threats to our strong agree. Neutrals disagree. Button.
So I disagree with the caveat that it definitely can be eventually, and it definitely will be.
Disagree. 8 values. Heading level 1. Separator. Question 1 of 7. It is important that we work as a united world to combat climate change.
Yes.
Heading not found. Heading not found. Strongly agree. Containers. Headings. Links. Form control. Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. Society was better many years ago than it is now. Strong.
No.
Neutrals disagree. Button. Disagree.
Never understood why people think this, because it never has been better. It's not better now. It's not better then. Back then there was racism. Back then there was. Let's just ignore the racism for now. Back then there was, serious problems with survival. So what time frame would you go back to? The 50s? Back then everything was, people were afraid. There was the communist threat that was happening. So what time would you go to then? The 60s? The Vietnam War was happening? So anytime you go back to, there's always problems. A lot of people have very, very, very short memories. Very, very, I don't want to say inaccurate, but very inaccurate memories. They only remember the good times, and they don't remember the bad times of those eras that they're thinking of.
Neutral slash unsure. Agree. Strongly. It is important that we maintain the traditions of our past. Strong. Agree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Button.
I kind of agree, but only like to a small degree, depending on what it is. But not because of the traditions or whatever, but because of how effective they are, how valuable they can be. I don't really want to go into that because that'd take forever as well.
Disagree. It is important that we think in the long term, beyond our lifespans. Strongly
Yes.
agree. Strongly agree. Strongly agree.
Strongly agree.
Reason is more important than maintaining our culture.
Kind of. But I have this problem with this idea of reason that people have. Oh, just think reasonably. Just think rationally. I'm sorry, but that doesn't work. Rationality doesn't exist. Reasonality doesn't exist in the way that you think it exists. People had reasons for doing the horrible atrocities of Hitler and Nazism. It's not rationality. It's not reason. But they thought it was. They thought it was rational. They thought it made sense. So rationality and reason is not this universal thing that you think it is. I'm sorry. It just isn't. I mean, if you want to argue that it is true that rationality is more rational in the senses that you think that it is, I can kind of agree, but that's only true to a certain extent, and that's only true because you think it is. It's only true because you have this idea that it is.
Question. Reason is more important than maintaining our culture. Strongly agree. Button.
So I kind of agree.
Agree. Drug use should be legalized or decriminalized. Strongly
Yes.
agree. Button. Strongly agree. Same-sex marriage should be legal. Strongly agree.
Yes.
Strongly agree.
Although I think it is in the United States at this point.
No cultures are superior to others.
I mostly agree. I already talked about this, so.
Strongly
Yes.
agree. Button. Agree. Sex outside marriage is immoral.
I mostly agree. I mostly disagree. I kind of talked about this, but it all depends on your perspective. I don't really care what you want to do, as long as you're not hurting anybody, and as long as you're not like going against your values.
Agree. Neutral slash unsure. Button.
Unless your values is hurting somebody, in which case go against your values, please.
Disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. If we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate into our culture.
A lot of people want to say this, but I don't agree. I mostly don't agree, except to a certain extent. Of, like I said, acting harmoniously, acting in a certain beneficial sort of way. But I understand that could also sound a bit authoritarian, and it's not like I'm saying that you have to act this way, but I think it would be better. And this is not just true for migrants. I think this is true for everybody. And this is not something that's happening, really in this country, as much as it probably should be. And I'm not. And a lot of people could take this idea and say, "Oh, this means you're supporting socialism and all this stuff." And I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, the way that you treat other people, the way that you behave in public and in private with your children, in public and in private. I'm not just talking about in public and all this stuff. So,
if we accept migrants at all, it is important that they assimilate into our culture.
I mostly disagree.
Neutral. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Disagree. Button. Disagree. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases.
I pretty much disagree with that. With that caveat of, abortion should be taken probably more seriously than. Although I honestly think that most people who get an abortion probably do take it pretty seriously as it is. So I don't think that's a problem as much as people think it is. As much as a lot of conservatives want to think it is. I'm not saying that people don't take it seriously and go, abortion, yay, everybody should get abortions. I'm sure there's some people like that. I saw there was some clip where this guy was saying something along the lines of, your baby should be born, it should be made comfortable, and then the parent and the doctor should decide whether you should keep the baby or get rid of the baby. And it sounded pretty bad the way he said it, because it made it sound like you should they were going to decide on whether to euthanize the baby. I don't know if that was necessarily what they meant, but it's still kind of disturbing.
Abortion should be prohibited in most or all cases. Strongly agree. Neutral. Disagree. Button.
I mostly disagree.
Disagree. Strongly agree. Button. Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason.
Oh God, I could see that. There's no way that could be used in really malicious ways or dumb, abusive ways. I'm sorry, but the idea of without a valid reason is really problematic. I mean, your valid reason could be, what's your valid reason? I don't think that's a good idea. Now, at the same time, I do understand the idea of gun control, but the problem is that gun control doesn't really work as much as people think it does. But at the same time, I understand the problem, and I do think something should be done, but I don't think it should be done with gun control for the most part, because I don't think it necessarily works.
Gun ownership should be prohibited for those without a valid reason. Strong agree. Neutral. Disagree. Button.
I mostly disagree.
Disagree. Strongly disagree. Neutral / unsure. Button. Agree. But strongly agree. I support single-payer universal healthcare.
I mostly disagree, except for, like I said, base level healthcare. And that if that's single payer, that's fine. But I don't think single payer is going to necessarily work. Mostly because it puts a lot of pressure on the government. Not to mention, although I don't think this is going to happen, but not to mention, if the government decides to become authoritarian, they could decide to just deny you health care for any reason. Oh, you protested against the government? Nope, no health care for you. Goodbye. Yeah, no, that's probably not a good idea.
I support single-payer universal healthcare.
So I mostly disagree.
Agree. Neutral. Disagree. Strongly disagree. Button. Disagree. Button. Disagree. Agree. Strong. Prostitution. Question 1. If prostitution should be illegal. Edit. Character words. Should be illegal.
I mostly disagree. But at the same time, with some caveats, you have to check for diseases regularly, or you have to do it in a way that's not, problematic, which is hard to do. Because you could somehow figure out a way to defraud the government into hiring a prostitute that was put in place because of human trafficking or something. So there's that to consider as well.
Prostitution should be illegal. Strong. Agree. Neutral / unsure. Disagree. Button.
But I mostly disagree.
Maintaining family values is essential.
I honestly kind of disagree, but I don't necessarily completely. I'm kind of neutral on this one. I don't really care. Whatever you want to do.
Agree. Neutral / unsure. Button.
But at the same time, I do understand the need for family values, but I don't know about essential.
Agree. Neutral / unsure. Button. Neutral / unsure. Disagree. Button. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. To chase progress at all costs is dangerous. Strongly agree.
Yes.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. Genetic modification is a force for good, even on humans. Strongly agree. Button.
I would kind of agree, but I would be kind of careful. But I would mostly probably agree, but be very, 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 very careful.
Agree. Button. Agree. Strong. We should open our borders to immigration. Strong. Agree. Button.
Ooh. I don't know. Not that I agree with Trump about building the wall or anything, but I do think we should have, border protection. But I don't know if we should go as extreme as Trump and or Obama has gone, because Obama was a lot of people were getting mad at Trump because he was quote unquote putting kids in cages, but Obama was doing the same thing. It wasn't just Trump. It was a thing put in place. I think it was during Clinton that was started. But it was definitely started probably around Bush for sure. So I agree with some kind of border patrol, but you have to not do it in that type of way. Although, it depends on how you do it, I guess.
Strongly agree. Agree. Strong. We should question one of we should open our borders to immigration. Strong. Agree. Neutral / unsure. Button.
As far as immigration is concerned, I guess I would agree. But with some caveats and stuff.
Agree. Button. Agree. Disagree. Button. Neutral. Agree. Strongly agree. Governments should be as concerned about foreigners as they are about their own citizens.
I kind of disagree, but I don't necessarily agree either. Because I do think that the government should be more concerned about our citizens, but
Question 170. Heading.
Other parts of the world as well should be concerned a little bit to the government. Not that they should be looking out for their welfare, but that they shouldn't be doing things to harm them, which they are doing. They're sending drone strikes that are hurting innocent civilians and hospital workers and all these things. That's not good. That's what I'm talking about here. That they shouldn't be doing that. They should be looking out for the welfare of the people in that sort of way.
Governments should be as concerned about foreigners as they are about their own citizens. Strongly agree. Button. Agree.
Kind of.
Question 170. All people, regardless of factors like culture or sexuality, should be treated equally. Strongly agree. Button. Strongly agree. It is important that we further my group's goals above all others. Strong agree. Strong back. Button. Strongly disagree. Button. Strongly disagree. 8 values. Separate results. Economic axis. Heading centrist. Heading level. Equality. ORD. 50.6%. 49.4%. Markets. Markets. 49.4%. 50. ORD. 50.6%. ORD. Equality. ORD. 40. Markets. Diplomatic. Peaceful. Heading level. Diplomatic axis. Head. Peaceful. Nation. 30.0%. 70.0%. World. Civil axis. Heading level. Liberal. Heading liberty. Authority. World. Markets. Tradition. Progress. ORD. 69.0%. 31.0%. Authority. Progress. ORD. Societal axis. Heading level 2. Very progressive. Heading level. Authority. World. Markets. Tradition. Progress. ORD. 24.8%. 75.2%. Progress. ORD. Closest match. Social democracy. Heading level 2. Ideological matching is a work in progress and is much less accurate than the values and axes. You can send these results by copying and pasting the separator. Social democracy. Heading level 2. Separate. Image. Back. Button. Back. Image. Separate. Ideological matching is a work in progress and is much. Social democracy. Heading level 2. Closest match. Heading level 2. Ideological matching is a work in progress. Social democracy. Heading level. Social democracy. Ideology. You can send these results by copying and pasting the URL at the top of the page or using the image below. Think your matched ideology was wrong? Want to help us calibrate the test? Send the results along with your political ideology to s8values@gmail.com. Separator. Dimmed. Image.
You don't really know what a social democracy is, but that's interesting.
Back. Button.
It's probably because some of the answers are kind of socialistic, even though I kind of disagree with a lot of those answers because of reasons I stated, but whatever. Anyways, I'll talk to you all later.
Heading level 2. VPN on. Status R item. Image. 0506. VPN. No screen recording in progress.